Inflation's been a hot topic lately, and November's numbers, they definitely keep that conversation going.
It does seem like inflation is something everyone's feeling one way or another.
Absolutely. Let's get right into it. The annual inflation rate went up in November to 2.7%. That's a little higher than October. It is interesting, though, that this was pretty close to what economists were predicting.
Yeah, economists actually got it right this time. They seem to be getting better at predicting these trends.
Maybe. But even if we were expecting it higher, inflation is never good news, especially when you look at the core CPI.
You're right. Core CPI doesn't include food and energy prices, and that stayed at 3.3%. This gives us a better look at the underlying inflation.
What does that tell us?
Well, it seems to say that inflation is sticking around even without the changes in food and energy prices.
That is concerning, especially with the Federal Reserve meeting coming up. They've been cutting interest rates, and these inflation numbers, they had to be a big part of their decision-making.
For sure. The market seems to think there's going to be another rate cut this month, but it'll be interesting to see how the Fed weighs that against the possibility of even more inflation.
Do you think because of these numbers, they might not cut rates?
It's possible. They're going to need to look at the risks carefully.
So much of the talk about inflation always comes back to housing costs. They've been a big driver of inflation, and it doesn't look like that's changing.
True. Housing costs are still going up, even though it's slower than before. The Fed is definitely keeping a close eye on this.
Why is housing such a big factor in inflation overall?
Housing is a big part of most people's budgets. When those costs go up, it affects how much they can spend on other things, and that has an impact throughout the whole economy.
Here's something I found surprising. Used car prices. They going down, but they actually went up in November. And new car prices went up too. What's causing this?
That's interesting. There could be a few things happening. Consumers might be feeling more confident, so demand is going up. Or maybe there are supply chain problems limiting new cars, so more people are buying used cars.
So we're seeing changes in both supply and demand.
Exactly. And that can have a big effect on prices.
How about food and energy prices? Any big changes there?
There's good news with food. Prices went up just a bit overall. And get this, the price of cereals and bakery products went down, like a record drop.
That's great to hear, especially with the holidays coming up. What about energy?
Energy costs did go up a little this month, but they're still a lot lower compared to last year.
So kind of a mixed bag there. But with prices going up everywhere, the big question is, how are wages keeping up?
That's the important question. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is average hourly earnings, when you adjust for inflation, they were pretty much flat for November.
So no real gains in buying power.
Not this month, but they're still higher than a year ago.
But for many people, it's still not enough to keep up with the cost of living.
That does seem to be the case for a lot of households.
All of this shows how complicated the economy is right now.
It is. There are a lot of factors at play in trying to figure out how they'll interact and what will happen in the end. That's a challenge.
It's interesting, though, how these things that seem separate are actually all connected, like how rising housing costs lead to inflation, which then affects wages. It's a delicate balance.
It shows you how interconnected the economy really is. Every piece affects the others. And to get through these uncertain times, it's crucial to understand those connections.
Definitely. It's like a giant puzzle where every piece changes the whole picture.
It really is a complex system with so many interconnected parts.
Trying to predict what will happen with that system is not easy. But we can look for some signs in the data, right? What do you think these inflation numbers from November mean for the average person?
Well, you have to remember these economic indicators, they're just a snapshot. They don't necessarily tell us exactly what the future holds.
But they can give us some insight into the current trends.
Looking at these numbers, would you say that inflation is still a big worry for most people?
Based on what we're seeing, I'd say yes. Inflation is affecting the price of everything from housing to groceries. That puts a strain on people's budgets.
And this is especially hard because wages haven't kept up with those rising prices.
That's right. While wages have gone up some over the last year, they haven't fully caught up with inflation. So many people are seeing their buying power decrease.
That makes you think about the long-term effects of these trends. What could happen if inflation keeps growing faster than wages?
If this keeps going, it could make living standards worse for a lot of people, especially those with lower incomes. It could also hurt consumer confidence and slow down economic growth.
So it's not just about the numbers themselves, it's about how they affect people's lives and the whole economy.
Exactly. These economic indicators aren't just numbers on a page. They have real consequences for individuals and businesses.
So what should people be doing about all this? Should they be worried? Worrying doesn't really help, but staying informed is really important. If people keep up with these economic indicators, it can help them make good financial decisions.
So knowing what's going on and being aware is key to getting through these tough economic times.
Absolutely. The more you understand about these trends, the better prepared you are to make smart choices about your money.
It can be a lot to try and keep up with all the economic data and analysis. What are some of the key things people should be watching for in the coming months?
Well, as we talked about the Federal Reserve's next meeting, that's going to be really important. What they decide about interest rates will have a big effect on the economy.
Everyone will be waiting to see what they do.
Besides that, I'd say pay attention to how things like housing costs, energy prices, and wages keep changing.
Those are the things that really hit people's everyday lives and their finances.
You got it. In the end, the most important thing is understanding how these economic forces are affecting you personally. That's what gives you the power to make informed choices and maybe lessen some of the negative effects.
So it's not just about seeing the big picture, it's about connecting it to your own situation.
Exactly. Making these economic trends personal, that's what makes them matter and gives you something to do about them.
This has been a really insightful conversation. Thanks for explaining all this for us.
It's been great talking about this. I hope it helps people understand a bit more about what's happening in our economy.
I think you did just that. You've given us some valuable insights and a clear way forward.
I appreciate that. It's important to remember, even with all the uncertainty in the economy, we can use knowledge and good decision-making to handle the challenges and maybe even find opportunities.
So there's always a good reason to stay informed and pay attention.
Absolutely right. The more we understand, the better we can handle whatever happens.
Well said. I think this has been a really valuable discussion.
I agree. It's been great talking with you and sharing these ideas.
You've given us a lot to think about. I really appreciate your expertise on all of this.
Thank you. It's always good to talk about these things and hopefully help people understand these important economic issues a little better.
It's definitely helped me understand things better, and I'm sure it has for our listeners too.
I hope so. It's so important for everyone to feel like they can make informed decisions in these complicated times.
Well, on that note, I think we've covered a lot today.
We have. We really took a deep look at what's happening with inflation right now.
Thanks again for taking the time to explain it all to us.
It was my pleasure.
Goodbye, and see you on the next video.